Ashling Murphy was the heart of Tullamore, a gifted teacher, a talented musician, and a beacon of joy for everyone who knew her. Connor Walsh was the town's quiet shadow, a reserved art student whose world seemed to exist on the fringes of society. Their lives couldn't have been more different, but on one fateful January day, their paths collided in a way that would shatter a community and leave an entire nation searching for answers. It was a crisp January morning in Tullamore, a small town nestled in the heart of Ireland. Known for its charming streets and welcoming community, the town was a place where everyone seemed to know each other, a place untouched by the chaos that often dominated the news in larger cities. That morning, Ashling Murphy, a vibrant 23-year-old schoolteacher, laced up her running shoes and stepped out into the cold air. It was a routine she had followed countless times before, a chance to clear her mind and embrace the natural beauty of the Grand Canal, a peaceful stretch of water bordered by lush greenery and winding paths. Ashling was well loved in her community, her warm personality and unwavering dedication to her students making her a role model for many. Outside of teaching, she was a gifted musician, playing the fiddle with a skill that captured the essence of traditional Irish music. Her life was full of promise and joy, with dreams of continuing to inspire those around her. On this particular day, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She waved to a neighbor as she set off, her bright smile a familiar sight in the town. As the morning gave way to the afternoon, the canal path became a hub of activity. Joggers, walkers, and cyclists frequented the area, drawn to its tranquility and beauty. The occasional bird call and the gentle ripple of water provided a soothing soundtrack, masking the darker events that were about to unfold. Ashling, dressed in her running gear, passed others on the trail, exchanging friendly nods and brief smiles as she went. By mid-afternoon, the unthinkable had happened. Ashling's lifeless body was discovered along the canal, her belongings scattered nearby. The scene was eerily quiet, save for the frantic calls to emergency services made by the couple who stumbled upon her. The news of her death sent shockwaves through the town. How could such a heinous act occur in broad daylight, in a place so familiar and safe? The Garda arrived swiftly, cordoning off the area as they began their investigation. Forensic teams combed through the scene, collecting evidence that could provide clues about what had happened during those fateful moments. Ashling's friends and family were devastated, struggling to comprehend the senseless violence that had taken her away from them. The canal path, once a symbol of peace, was now a place of mourning. Word of Ashling's death spread quickly, and soon the entire country was gripped by the tragedy. People lit candles and laid flowers at the scene, creating a growing memorial that stood as a testament to her impact on the lives she had touched. As the investigation unfolded, the community held its breath, waiting for answers. No one could have imagined that such an ordinary day would take such a horrific turn, leaving behind a haunting question. Who could have committed this unthinkable crime, and why? The Gardaí wasted no time in launching a thorough investigation into Ashling Murphy's murder. It was a crime that defied logic, occurring in broad daylight in a public space frequented by locals. The serene canal path, once a symbol of tranquility, had become a crime scene, its peace shattered by an act of incomprehensible violence. Officers began piecing together Ashling's final hours, hoping to uncover the identity of the person responsible for this heinous act. The first step was to examine the crime scene. Forensic experts meticulously combed the area, collecting every trace of evidence they could find. Scattered footprints suggested a struggle, while fragments of fabric caught on nearby branches hinted at the possible involvement of a second person. Yet, despite their efforts, no immediate answers emerged. The canal path, surrounded by thick vegetation and a winding trail, was an unforgiving place for investigators, its secluded corners hiding more questions than answers. Witness testimonies became the next focus. Dozens of people had been in the area that day, and the Gardaí worked tirelessly to interview each one. Most recounted ordinary scenes: joggers, dog walkers, and cyclists going about their routines. However, one elderly man offered a peculiar detail. He recalled seeing a man behaving strangely near the canal around the time of the murder. This man, described as wearing a dark hoodie and sneakers, had been pacing nervously, his head turning repeatedly as if checking for someone. When the elderly man passed him, the stranger had abruptly left the path and disappeared into the nearby bushes. The mention of this unidentified man provided the Garda with their first potential lead. Officers scoured CCTV footage from nearby roads and businesses, searching for any trace of him. Hours of video revealed little, but a camera located at a bridge near the canal finally provided a breakthrough. The grainy footage captured a shadowy figure riding a bicycle away from the canal at high speed. The timestamp matched the estimated time of Ashling's murder, and the urgency of the rider's movements raised suspicions. The discovery of the abandoned bicycle near the crime scene added to the growing sense of unease. Forensic analysis revealed fingerprints on the handlebars, but they didn't match any known records. The bicycle, an older model with worn tires, seemed to have been used deliberately to avoid detection. With no immediate match for the prints, the Garde faced an unsettling possibility. The killer might be someone entirely unknown to law enforcement. As the investigation deepened, the community's fear grew. Tullamore, a town where people left their doors unlocked and children played freely, was now gripped by paranoia. Parents kept their children close, and every unfamiliar face drew wary glances. Candlelight vigils were held in Ashling's memory, the flickering flames reflecting both sorrow and determination. People longed for justice, but with each passing day, the sense of urgency grew. Who was the mysterious man spotted by the elderly witness? Was he the killer or merely a bystander to a crime no one had seen? The answers remained agonizingly out of reach, leaving Tullamore in a state of mourning and suspense. The sudden disappearance of Brendan O'Connor sent shockwaves through the investigation. Until then, the Gardaí believed they had a prime suspect in the reclusive handyman. His erratic behavior, combined with his lack of an alibi for the time of Ashling's murder, made him an easy focus. But just as officers prepared to bring him in for questioning, Brendan vanished without a trace. His absence cast a shadow of doubt over the case and fueled public speculation. Was he fleeing because he was guilty, or was there another reason for his disappearance? The search for Brendan became a nationwide effort. Gardaí expanded their operations beyond Tullamore, alerting neighboring towns and cities to be on the lookout. His photograph circulated widely on news outlets and social media, and checkpoints were established on major roads. Despite these efforts, Brendan remained elusive. Some speculated he might have taken refuge in the dense woods surrounding the canal, an area he was known to frequent. Others believed he might have left the country altogether, slipping through the cracks before authorities could act. While the hunt for Brendan continued, the forensic team made a startling discovery that shifted the direction of the investigation. The fingerprints found on the bicycle abandoned near the crime scene were re-examined and compared against national and international databases. To the shock of the Garda, they did not belong to Brendan. This revelation meant one thing: their presumed suspect might have been innocent all along. The news of this breakthrough caused a ripple of unease throughout the town. If Brendan wasn't the person behind Ashling's murder, then who was? The fear that had gripped Tullamore intensified, and trust in the investigation began to waver. Brendan's disappearance, once seen as an admission of guilt, was now a perplexing mystery in its own right. Was he hiding from something or someone? Amid these developments, a forensic botanist analyzing soil samples from Ashling's running shoes made an intriguing discovery. Embedded in the soles were traces of a rare moss, one found only in a specific area of the canal path. This area was far removed from the main trail, a secluded spot rarely visited by locals. The presence of the moss suggested that Ashling had been forced off the main path before the attack, potentially into a hidden location where the crime had occurred. The finding added a chilling layer to the investigation, pointing to the possibility that her murder had been premeditated. Authorities quickly moved to search the moss-rich area. What they found was both puzzling and disturbing: a makeshift campsite hidden in the brush. The site contained scattered belongings, including a worn blanket, empty food wrappers, and most notably, a notebook filled with unsettling sketches and cryptic notes. The drawings depicted faceless figures, dark forests, and disjointed phrases that seemed to reflect an unbalanced mind. The discovery reignited the investigation, raising questions about who had been using the campsite and whether they were connected to the crime. As the days stretched into weeks, the Gardaí faced mounting pressure to solve the case. Brendan O'Connor's disappearance remained an unresolved thread, but the forensic evidence pointed to a broader and more complex picture. The canal, once a peaceful retreat for Tullamore's residents, had become the epicenter of a deepening mystery. Ashling's family, grieving yet determined, continued to call for justice, their voices joined by a community desperate for answers. The question lingered. If Brendan wasn't the killer, then who was? And why had they chosen Ashling? The investigation into Ashling Murphy's murder took a startling turn as the evidence found at the makeshift campsite deepened the mystery. Among the items collected, the notebook became the focal point of the Garda's efforts. Its contents were haunting. A series of crude sketches depicting shadowy figures and unsettling phrases such as purity, sacrifice, and silence in the trees. To investigators, it seemed to provide a glimpse into the mind of someone deeply troubled, perhaps even dangerous. Yet the most critical question remained unanswered. Who had left it there? Forensic experts analyzed the notebook, focusing on the handwriting and fingerprints. It wasn't long before a match was made. The handwriting belonged to Connor Walsh, a local art student known for his introverted nature and penchant for sketching alone by the canal. Connor was a familiar figure to some in the community, often seen with his sketchpad, lost in his own world. He was soft-spoken and reserved, and his presence rarely drew attention. However, the discovery of the notebook shifted that perception entirely. The Gardaí brought Connor in for questioning, hoping his connection to the campsite would shed light on the crime. Initially, he appeared cooperative, answering questions calmly and showing no signs of agitation. He admitted that the campsite was his, explaining that he often retreated there to sketch and think. However, when asked about the day of Ashling's murder, his responses became inconsistent. Connor claimed he had been at home during the time in question, but could not provide anyone to corroborate his story. The inconsistencies in his account raised suspicions, and investigators delved deeper into his background. They discovered a history of mental health struggles, though nothing in his past suggested violent tendencies. Friends and acquaintances described him as quiet, almost painfully shy, but harmless. Still, the combination of his connection to the campsite and the disturbing contents of the notebook was enough to keep him under scrutiny. As investigators worked to piece together Connor's possible involvement, they uncovered another intriguing clue. A neighbor of Connor's came forward, claiming they had noticed something unusual in the days following the murder. Connor had been absent from his apartment for 2 full days, returning only after the news of Ashling's death had begun to dominate the headlines. When he did return, the neighbor noticed he seemed anxious, frequently looking out his windows as if expecting someone to arrive. This behavior, combined with the gaps in his timeline, painted a troubling picture. Despite the mounting suspicion, the case against Connor remained circumstantial. There was no direct evidence placing him at the scene of the crime, and his DNA did not match any found on Ashling or her belongings. Investigators were left grappling with a frustrating question. Was Connor a misunderstood artist with unfortunate connections to the crime, or was he hiding something more sinister? As the investigation pressed on, the community grew increasingly restless. The discovery of Connor's link to the campsite and notebook reignited speculation and fear. Tullamore, once a peaceful haven, felt like a town under siege, its residents haunted by the uncertainty of not knowing who had taken Ashling's life. The Garda remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice, but with each passing day, the pressure to find definitive answers became more intense. Connor Walsh was a piece of the puzzle, but whether he was the key to solving it remained to be seen. The breakthrough in Ashling Murphy's case came from an unexpected source, a jogger who had been running on the same canal path that fateful afternoon. Days after the murder, she reviewed the footage recorded on her smartwatch, hoping to recall any detail that might help the investigation. As she scanned the video, her heart raced. Amid the ordinary scenes of other joggers and walkers, she noticed a blurred figure trailing Ashling in the background. The figure moved with a deliberate pace, never closing the gap, but always staying within sight. Something about their movements felt calculated, almost predatory. The footage was immediately handed over to the Garda, who enhanced it to extract as much detail as possible. Although the figure's face remained obscured, one detail stood out: a scarf slung loosely over their shoulder, bright enough to catch the light even in the blurry video. This scarf became the critical clue that tied the case together. Investigators combed through the evidence collected near the crime scene and, after an exhaustive search, found the scarf partially buried under a bush close to the secluded moss-rich area identified earlier. The scarf was sent for forensic testing, and the results were conclusive. It carried traces of Connor Walsh's DNA. The discovery shattered any lingering doubts about his connection to the case. Faced with this irrefutable evidence, Connor was brought in for further questioning. Under mounting pressure, his calm demeanor began to crack, and eventually, he confessed to being involved in Ashling's death. Connor's confession painted a chilling picture. He admitted that he had been watching Ashling for weeks, captivated by her energy and the seemingly effortless way she brought joy to others. He described feeling invisible in his own life, consumed by frustration and envy. On the day of the murder, he had followed her along the canal path, unable to control the dark impulses building within him. When she stopped for a moment near the secluded area, Connor saw his chance and forced her off the main trail. What followed was a senseless act of violence that ended in tragedy. As Connor detailed his actions, his motivations revealed a deeply troubled mind. He claimed he hadn't intended to harm Ashling initially, but lost control when she resisted. His words did little to ease the pain of those who loved her, nor did they fully explain the brutality of his actions. Still, his confession provided the answers the community so desperately sought. The trial that followed was swift. Connor Walsh was found guilty of Ashling's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The verdict brought a measure of closure to Tullamore, but the scars of the tragedy lingered. The canal path, once a place of solace, became a poignant reminder of what had been lost. Ashling's family and friends turned their grief into a mission to honor her legacy. They established scholarships in her name and organized music festivals to celebrate her passion for Irish traditions. Across Ireland, her story sparked conversations about safety, mental health, and the hidden dangers that could lurk even in the most idyllic places. Though justice had been served, Ashling's loss left an indelible mark on Tullamore and beyond. Her memory endured as a symbol of light extinguished too soon, a reminder of the fragility of life, and a call to cherish every moment.